behalf of North Allegheny School District, I'd like to welcome all of you to tonight's presentation. My name is John Kreider. I have the privilege of serving as the building principal at the senior high school. And tonight's presentation will focus in on the dangers of vaping and teens. And across the school district and really across the region and the United States, there's been a new replacement for cigarettes and e-cigarettes in the form of vaping, and tonight's presentation is going to focus in on a lot of important information that for you as parents, community members, and also students, we think you'll find great value in learning some of the information that we have to share with you this evening. At this time, I'd like to welcome Mr. Doug Brinkley to the podium here. Mr. Brinkley serves as the Student Assistant Coordinator here at the Intermediate High School, and he is going to take the program from this point forward. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. As Mr. Carter said, I am Doug Brinkley. I'm the Student Assistance Coordinator here at the Intermediate High School, and I welcome you to NAI. As Mr. Carter said, you know, we have concerns with vaping and concerns that go along with vaping throughout our school district and many other school districts here in Western Pennsylvania. Tonight's events and the events that we're going to talk about this evening, we're going to have Mr. Kyle Harder from Gateway Rehab. We'll talk about the concerns that we have about concerns around addiction and how the science behind all of the things that are being used within the vapes that will then, the concerns that we have, and as a professional from Gateway Rehab, the great experience he has with them and working with students and adults with the concerns that they have with addiction. After that, Mr. Longo, who's also the Student Assistance Coordinator here at the school district, will get up and we'll introduce our next speaker, who is Rebecca Kishlock. Rebecca's from Breathe, Pennsylvania. She has a great deal of information about the different types of vapes, the style of vapes, how the vapes are used, how students are using the vapes, how the students are misusing the vapes, to be able to get you all of that information so that as students here today, you learn about the dangers of each of the vapes that are available and the concerns that we have as professionals for each of you, and also for parents to get you that information so you can have the conversations with your students about what other students are using and the dangers of them, the harms of them, and how to be able to help each and every one of our students here at North Allegheny. As I said, our first speaker is Mr. Kyle Harder. Kyle is from Gateway Rehab. I'm going to pass it on to him. After each of our presenters, we will also have a time period where we'll have some questions and answers. We want to get all of your questions answered. We'll also, when the conclusion of our event, both of our speakers are going to make themselves available so you can come up and ask them individual questions. So if you have questions when both of them are done presenting, we'll provide that opportunity to you, but also the opportunity to come on up and ask them any questions you have. Also, this evening we'll have Dr. Shears here this evening to talk about the push that we're having as a school district to be able to help each and every one of our students with the concerns that we'll talk about tonight. I want to thank you very much for coming this evening. I'll pass things off to Mr. Kyle Harder.
Good evening. How's it going? You guys sound half asleep. All right. Well, I like the title. It said the dangers of teens and vaping. So everybody knows teens are very dangerous. So really, my name's Kyle Harder. I work at Gateway Rehab, and I'm going to kind of go over a little bit about addiction in general and a little bit about the adolescent brain. Yes, there is an adolescent brain. And then I'll talk a little bit about nicotine and kind of what nicotine does to you, what it does to the brain, and especially how it interacts with the adolescent brain. So, first of all, with addiction, we're talking about 10 to 15% of the population. Now, this is in the United States. 10 to 15% of the population is addicted to some form of drugs or alcohol. So, when you think about it, that's a lot of people. And of this number, probably about 10% they estimate actually get treatment. So, you can see with all the news about the opioid epidemic and why this is such a big problem. So let's talk about 12th graders. This shows you kind of graphic illustration of 12th graders and what the usage patterns are for high schoolers. So in a class of 32, you're going to have about 8 out of the 32 have used some form of illicit drugs in the last month. So this isn't just have used it at some point. This is used in the last month. 12 out of the 32 will have used it in the last year, and about 15 out of 32 will have tried drugs at some point. So that's almost half. That's almost half of the 12th grade classroom. How do people use drugs? Well, there's a lot of different ways, and how the drug is used really affects how fast it gets into the brain. So tonight we're going to be talking about drugs being inhaled, whether it's nicotine or marijuana or whatever drug. That is the fastest. So this says about 3 to 7 seconds. You know, within 10 to 20 seconds, it's actually in the brain and actually starting to work on the brain from the vapes. Teenage years, people have shown, is kind of the danger zone. That's where people who develop addictions, who use drugs, kind of get started. So if you look here, most of between the ages of 14 and 17, and even getting up into 20, is when most people start using illicit drugs. It's kind of rare for people to start using them later on in life. So the teenage years are definitely the most important and where we want to really educate people the most on it. So what kind of drugs have we seen the teenager using the most? Now, it will be different than adults. Some of them will be the same, but some of them will be different as well. So pretty much with teenagers, if you can see from this chart, we're talking about marijuana, pills, and alcohol. Now, this is illicit drugs. We're going to talk a lot about nicotine tonight, and that's not included in this list. Here you can see the blue lines are teenagers. The orange lines would be 18 to 25-year-olds, and the green would be 26 and up. So you can see the percentages of what they use. Again, marijuana, alcohol, and pills are the most commonly used. This also, you probably can't see these numbers here, but they do a survey every year. SAMHSA, which is the federal agency that deals with substance abuse, they do a national survey every year on drug use. It's called the NSDUH. So if you ever want to look up statistics, they have more statistics than you can even think of on there. And they go in and they take surveys and they just ask people, have you used drugs in the last month? What have you used? And they've taken this state by state. And you can see Pennsylvania's over here in the brown. And that is a percentage of teenagers that have used drugs in the last month, and it's about 7 to 8%. So this is only illicit drugs. This does not include alcohol. So if you added alcohol to this, the number would be higher. And as you get older, from 12 up to 18, the percentages get higher as well. So, 7 to 8%, maybe that doesn't seem like a lot. But if you take a school district like NA, that's probably, that could be 300 to 400 kids in the middle school, probably middle school and high school age groups. So, it's a sizable number. So one of the important things that we look at, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the presentation, is the age of first use. That can be very important to determine if the risk factors for somebody developing an addiction later on in life. So if we look at the different age of first use, it's really gone down. So we look at 1965, it was about 17 and a half, and this would include alcohol as well. So this would be any drugs or alcohol. 1996, it was 15, and now we're down to about 11 or 12 for the age of first use, which seems pretty young. My daughter actually goes to school here, and I could have her stand up and ruin her life forever. But, to think about her using alcohol and drugs, it seems, 11 or 12 is very young. Of course, she's much older than 11 or 12 by now. Why? Social media, that's a big reason. We see things on social media. Now, the kids aren't on Facebook. That's for us old people. But social media definitely has an influence on why. Media messages, these are out there. These are messages that, we as adults we kind of laugh at and we get. But these are the kind of things that the teenagers see. These are the kind of messages that are out there. So there's a lot, everywhere from commercials on TV. They also took a look at, kind of the influences for teenagers. This can have a big factor. This can be a big factor on why the age of first use has dropped. 1960, you can see family was number one. 1980, friends went out. When they did the survey in 2004, it was the media. So you can see us poor family members, we're sitting down here at number 3. So between the media and their peers, that's going to have a lot of influence on them, and it's a big factor and a big risk factor for addiction. So let's take a look at what is addiction. Addiction has many things. If you look in the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, that gives you the official way that you can diagnose addiction. But the American Psychiatric Association says it's a brain disease manifested by compulsive substance use despite harmful consequences. That's really what separates, someone who's maybe just, if you're an adult, you're over 21, you enjoy alcohol, you have a couple drinks, you're probably not having harmful consequences. So when we're talking addiction, we're talking this has really affected their life, and they continue using despite it affecting their life. So addiction is a brain disease, and it's kind of a hard concept to grasp. People look at addiction, and the symptoms of the disease are not very sympathetic. It's it could be crime, it could be lying, it could be stealing, people using drugs in front of their kids. And we look at that and we think, how can that be disease? That looks an awful lot like a choice. But I'm going to go over some things tonight and show you how these drugs, and even nicotine, can affect your brain in a really powerful way. So, addiction really is a cycle. And the different parts of the brain, most drugs work in this part of the brain here. It's our midbrain. It's called the basal ganglia. It's our limbic system. That's our reward system. It's our pleasure center. So it's not just the center of our brain where things feel good, we do something fun, and we like it. It's really how we learn. It's how we learn what to do, what not to do, what we want to do, what we want to stay away from. And that's where drugs really affect. They really affect that part of the brain. So, it's a vicious cycle between hitting the basal ganglia with these feelings of intoxication, this release of dopamine, to withdrawal symptoms. And that's in a little bit different part of the brain. That's kind of the part of our brain where we have our adrenaline system and some other systems like that. We get that withdrawal. Then our prefrontal cortex starts thinking about, what can I do to get rid of those withdrawal symptoms, whether that's nicotine, whether it's alcohol, heroin, whatever it is. Our brain starts to think about what we can do to reduce those symptoms. And we go right back to using that drug again. And this cycle just keeps going and going. And, a lot of our patients at Gateway, that's where they find themselves, in this cycle that they can't get out of. At some point, people lose their choice to decide whether to use the drug or not. These cravings and this rewiring of the brain is very powerful. So, all right, we'll look at the adolescent brain. Well, first of all, we'll start talking about the brain in general. This is actual brain imagery over time. And basically, the blue is a more developed brain. And our brains really develop from the back to the front in general. The back of our brains are where we have the older parts of our brain, like our brain stem. Then we get to the midbrain, where we do have our emotions. And then we get to the front part of our brain, where we have our thinking, our judgment, our critical thinking. And the older parts of the brain always win out. So, think of it like, if you're sitting down to plan a family vacation, you're using the front part of your brain. Well, these older parts of the brain are going to take over. Let's say you're sitting there and all of a sudden, someone comes and smacks you on the head. You're going to feel a little pain, right? That's in your midbrain. Just for a second, maybe you're going to stop thinking about your vacation because that part of your brain took over. Then think about if someone came up to you, stuck a bag over your head, and cut off your oxygen. I don't think you really wouldn't be thinking about planning your vacation. That's in your brainstem. That's the part of your brain that says we need to breathe. So that's the way drugs work, as they take over these older parts of our brain. So from the age 5 up to 20, you can see how the brain kind of develops from the back to the front. So these blue parts are the more developed. So right here in these teenage years, there's not a lot of development in our prefrontal cortex. That is still forming. The limbic system in the teenagers is really cranking up into high gear at this time. This is what puberty kicks into these in this system, and it's really heading upwards. And the prefrontal cortex is not really developed. So you got a lot of emotion and not a lot of good judgment and thinking. Sound familiar? So this is kind of what it looks like, right? Mood swings, impulsivity, risk-taking, peer-directed. A lot of things come from their friends. And impaired decision-making. Or just call it a Tuesday, right? So, we got the limbic system firing up. This part of the reward center of the brain is really kicking in, and the prefrontal cortex is not developed. And this is key for understanding what drugs do to the adolescent brain. So let's look a little more at addiction and how that affects the brain. How am I doing on time? I'm doing all right. You have the baseline right here. Everyone has a baseline. First time you use a drug, whether that's alcohol, nicotine, marijuana, whatever it is, you're going to have probably the best high or the best feeling because you really don't have to use much of it. There's not much of a tolerance you have built up. So there's not much of a crash, not much of a withdrawal symptoms. But most drugs, as you continue to use them, your tolerance builds up. So you need to use more and more of the drug to get the same feeling, like I said, whether it's nicotine or alcohol, whatever it is. Pretty soon you're going to find yourself down here just trying to use drugs to get up to your normal. In the case of nicotine, the withdrawal symptoms can be really unpleasant. If anyone's tried to quit smoking, you know what the withdrawal symptoms of nicotine are. They can be very unpleasant. So people need to use nicotine just to feel better, just to kind of get up and get their day and get their day going. Now, what does this look like? People, especially parents, want to know, what kind of things do I look for? And always, I would say the biggest thing is changes. Look for changes. If someone used to be really withdrawn, now they're really kind of boisterous and out there, or someone used to be outgoing and now they're withdrawn, those could all be signs. Getting in trouble at school, getting late to school, maybe not doing homework, getting in fights, behavior problems, different consequences like that, appearing to lack motivation, more than normal for teenagers. That could be something. So there's going to be some behavioral changes. Physical changes. These are definitely things we can look at. The eyes tell a lot. Whether they're dilated, whether they're constricted pupils, these are all signs of different types of drugs. Blood pressure problems, heart rate increases, weight gain, or it could be weight loss, depending on the type of drug that they're using. Blood pressure problems, a lot of nausea, constipation, different things like this can be signs of some type of drug use. The other big one is social changes. Whether it's vaping or drinking, whatever it is, if you start doing this on a regular basis, you're probably going to have to find new friends. So you'll find a different social circle. You'll find your kids hanging out with different people than they used to hang out with before. Money problems, legal problems, these kind of things can be early signs that you can notice. They say on average it takes about 2 years for a parent to find out their child's doing drugs. So if you can really be attuned to some of these things, a lot of parents, I've talked to a lot of parents, and, they kind of had a feeling, but they really couldn't put their finger on it until they found out, and then they realized, looking back, what it was. But these are some things to look at. Now, how do some people get addicted, and how do some people not? Probably the biggest risk factor is family genetics. And not just genetics, but also the family environment that you grew up in. So, they estimate that's about 50 to 70% of addiction is genetic. The other one is early exposure, like we talked about, the age of when they first use drugs. The other one would be high-risk environments like poverty, domestic violence, divorce, different situations that children might go through that would be difficult. And mental illness, that's another big one that we see a lot. So if you take family history and age of first use, This is a graph that will show you. These are the percentage likelihood of developing an addiction at some point in life. And this is the age of first use. So you can see someone, the blue line is a family history present. The green line is no family history. So you can see a 13-year-old with a family history of addiction would have almost a 60% likelihood of developing an addiction. Now, if you took that 13-year-old and put off their first use to 17 or 18, you drop their chances to about 20 to 30%. So, that's why a lot of prevention programs like this and things they do in the school can be very important. Education, especially with adolescents, if you can push that first use off, you're going to do a world of good. So they said people that talk to their parents about drugs are 42% less likely to use them. However, about 25% of the kids said they've had these conversations. So, these are very important conversations, and, that's why nights like this are very important. Even afterwards, you can talk about it. Let's talk about nicotine. So we kind of talked about addiction. Rebecca's going to talk a little more about vaping, but I wanted to talk about nicotine, the actual drug, and not talk about, smoke or the vapors or anything like that. Just a few things. You can kind of see some of these facts about nicotine, but just to highlight a few of them. Nicotine is a stimulant. It comes from a plant. It is psychoactive, which means it does affect the brain chemistry. One of the big factors is almost 70% of people who use nicotine become dependent. That's a pretty high number. Some of the other drugs, like cocaine and methamphetamines, are a little bit higher, but they're all up about that same rate. About 500,000 people a year die from nicotine products. That's a lot. And also, 9 out of 10 cigarette smokers first tried smoking before the age of 18. So 90% of the smokers started before they're 18. You can see some more statistics over here. About 11% say they've used e-cigarettes in some form, way up from 2011, from 1.5%. So you can see this is something that's getting bigger and bigger. So we talked about the limbic system. Nicotine, like I said, other drugs, also works in this system here, right here. And this is a system, when nicotine hits the brain, it's weird. It's a stimulant, but it also produces like a relaxing, like sedative feeling because it does release dopamine. So when nicotine first gets in the body, it does start to release some adrenaline. And that's why people, when they smoke, that you can get some energy, kind of gets them going in the morning, but it also gets into the brain and releases some dopamine. Now, when you hit the brain stem here, this is our vital functions, and that's going to increase your breathing. Your breathing, your heart rate, your blood pressure, all those things are going to go up as soon as you get that nicotine in your brain. And like I said, it could be about 10 seconds from that first puff to when it starts to work in your brain. It's pretty quick. I don't know if you can read all these, but these are the side effects of nicotine. This is not smoking either. When you smoke, you have other factors like carcinogens and different things you bring into your lungs, but this is just nicotine. So it's got implications for everything from your intestines to your hormones to your muscles to your heart, central nervous system. Obviously, when you're pregnant, it can cause a lot of damage. One of the things with teenagers is how this can affect them long term. They've done studies, and I'll show you some graphs that'll talk to you about this, but teenagers are very susceptible to developing an addiction to nicotine. Like I said, the prefrontal cortex is not developed. So nicotine gets into the brain, and it actually can permanently affect the way the prefrontal cortex can develop. So memory problems, attention deficit problems is a big problem with teenagers that use nicotine. These are attention problems that can develop while adolescent and actually last longer into adulthood. Executive functioning impairments, mental health problems. They've done studies where whether it's psychotic episodes or things like that, that has been linked to early cigarette use or nicotine use. One of the things too is as you start to smoke, your body increases the number of receptors in your brain. So there's these nicotine receptors, and I'll show you this right here. Right in here. And as you start to use nicotine on a regular basis, what your body does is your brain does is it starts to produce more of these receptors. Now that's important because that speeds up the addiction process, and it also makes the withdrawal symptoms more difficult. So the more receptors you have in your brain, the more difficult it is to quit, and the more likelihood you're going to be dependent. So what happens is nicotine gets into these receptors, and it releases this dopamine, and this is what makes you feel good. So as soon as that cigarette hits you, you're feeling good. Now, what happens is your body stops producing its own dopamine. And this is true of other drugs as well. Opiates especially are very powerful in this way. Is it rewires the brain into only releasing dopamine when this drug is present. That's why quitting smoking is so difficult. That's why people get cranky, they get irritable, they eat more, things like that, because without this drug in our brains, the brains do not produce dopamine. Dopamine is what makes us feel good. They did studies with rats where they took out this dopamine system thinking, well, this could be a key to solving some of the addiction problem. Well, rats with this limbic system taken out of their brain did not want to do anything. They had no motivation. It's really what gives us the motivation to do things we enjoy doing, things that give us pleasure. That's a very important system. So with these number of receptors increasing, that's very important for teenagers. They did studies with adolescent rats. Yes, there are like teenage rats out there. I think they're on Snapchat. So they looked at these, they took teenage rats versus adult rats. And they saw how often they would use nicotine, and when they used nicotine, how much nicotine they would use. And they found that the adolescent rats used nicotine much more often, and they used it in higher doses. This puts adolescents at a much higher risk of becoming dependent. They've looked at the brain, and they found out that even as quickly as 1 to 2 days of using nicotine, the adolescent brain can start to become dependent on it. So this is much quicker than adults. So these things start to hit the adolescent brain much different. Those nicotine receptors I told you that increase, the rate that they increase in adolescents is much higher than they would increase in adults. The other thing that they looked at was when something's perceived as not being very harmful, the use goes up. So over here we have cigarette use. The red is perceived risk of harm. So as we see the risk, we perceive the risk to be higher, you could see the use go down. This over here is marijuana. You could see as the perceived risk of marijuana goes down, you can see the use goes up. That's the reason why some of these education programs are important, because as soon as we think it's harmless, and I've gone out and I've talked to different schools, and a lot of teenagers think marijuana is harmless. They think nicotine's harmless. If we can educate them that it's not, that can go a long ways. When people think it could be harmful to them, they use less of it. And the damage we talk to with the brain, the cognitive functioning, the attention problems, we don't see that in people that start smoking as adults. We only see that when people smoke in the adolescent years. That's where that damage from nicotine to the brain seems to be permanent, whereas in adults we do not see that permanent change to the prefrontal cortex. That's where a lot of the changes happen in nicotine, is the prefrontal cortex. And that's a lot of our cognitive functioning, our memory, our attention, and things like that. So anyways, ignore this. Don't ask questions. I'm going to pass this off to Jeff, right?
Thank you very much, Kyle. Hi, my name is Jeff Longo. As mentioned earlier, I am the Student Assistance Program Coordinator at the senior high school. I had the pleasure last year of meeting this next young lady, Rebecca Kishlock. We have referred some of our students who have violated our tobacco or nicotine policy to a program called Smokeless Saturday. And it's an educational program talking a lot about what has already been said and more what she's going to talk about. But it's a really good program that some of our students have gone to. We brought Becky into our pupil services team meeting at the high school. It was last year, and we thought we knew a little bit about what was going on with vaping, and we learned a lot. And what you're going to learn from her tonight is going to be a lot. Rebecca she works for a company called Breathe, Pennsylvania. She is a tobacco cessation and education program associate, and she's pretty much dedicated her life, I think, to nicotine cessation, working with adults in the prison systems and with teenagers now with the Smokeless Saturday program. She is a wealth of information, and so you're in for a good amount of information here regarding electronic cigarettes. And so without further ado, let me introduce Rebecca Kishlock.
I was like, wait, I don't see it up here. All right, good evening, everyone. So again, my name is Becky Kishlock. I work with Breathe, Pennsylvania. I really hope to not put you on overload with this information. So I have a decent amount of slides. I am sure that you will have a lot of questions. Feel free at the end to come up and ask anything that you like. The slides may seem as though we're not going to cover something that we will proceed to cover in probably 4 slides later. So bear with me on, how these are laid out. So the first thing I want you to know is electronic cigarette use has drastically increased. So in order to understand everything about an electronic cigarette, you really need to understand what they look like. So I'm going to go through a series of photos. This very first one is a traditional electronic cigarette. So an electronic cigarette has a battery, an atomizer, and a cartridge. Every single electronic cigarette on the market has these 3 components. So if everybody can take a really good look at this, and it looks similar to a traditional cigarette. Now, the pictures that I'm going to show you coming up will look absolutely nothing like this, but the internal parts and pieces stay the same. So here we have some different types of electronic cigarettes. And essentially what we have is everything that was a traditional product has turned into an electronic form. So we have vapor pipes, we have cigar-like, we have pen style, which is in the middle, and I'm going to try and find the button right here. That's a pen style. This is a cig-alike. That means it's very similar to cigarettes. You change the cartridge on top. These are mods. That's called modification. You have regulated and unregulated mods, and we'll talk about what they are coming up. So does this look familiar to anyone? No? I'm going to ask you to be interactive as well throughout. Okay, so right here are the cig-alike. On the left, we have a traditional $10 product. It's a one and done. You can purchase this product at Get-Go, at Sheetz. You don't see this very often when people have been using more of the electronic devices. This is something that we see for somebody that is maybe transitioning from traditional cigarettes into an electronic device. Over on the right is something that looks similar to a traditional cigarette, but it's rechargeable. So it has a chargeable pod that goes with it, and you change that cartridge on top. That would be your nicotine. You change that in and out once you've used it all. So this might start to look a little bit more familiar. This is a pen-style refillable. This is a very popular electronic cigarette. This is where you would insert juice, insert the liquid into the top part of this pen. These are also rechargeable. This is a mod. So I had told you mod stands for modification. This is the traditional mod. This is not what all mods look like. Mods are very powerful. There is tricks and there are different things that adolescents and adults are both doing So I can tell you, although this is the traditional mod, you may see this in different colors, you may see this in different designs. You can see it in quite a variety of things. So coming up, these are also mods. So you can see the one in the middle is an Altoids container. The one on the left is an old Nintendo controller. And the one on the right is a game. So this looks enticing, this looks encouraging, this looks fun to adolescents. Do you think that this is dangerous? Yes, absolutely. So here we have another new product, and these all look very different. This is Soarin' Air. So this is a product that is very small, very discreet. It looks generally like an iPod. It's about the size of an iPod, a little bit smaller, maybe more like a credit card. You can see these throughout schools right now. A lot of the devices that have been confiscated from schools, this is one of them. It is a very easy product to conceal. It also charges very easy. It only takes about 20 minutes to fully charge this device. You can pack this with up to 60 milligrams of nicotine in one cartridge. These are very, very inexpensive products. This product can range from about $15 to $25 depending on where you purchase it. So this is the absolute most popular thing when it comes to electronic cigarettes and vaping. So this is the Juul. The Juul is a modification. It's a regulated mod, so there is temperature control with this. These are very similar to a USB or a flash drive. They're very small devices. They have the rechargeable right here, so you could plug that into a laptop, a computer. This product takes about 25 to 30 minutes to charge fully. These are the different flavors that you see with this product. So we have mango, cool mint, Virginia tobacco, fruit medley, and creme brulee. This product only has these flavors. So these are interchangeable. Once you use the product, you dispose of it and purchase another one. So I'm going to give you some facts about the Juul, since this is predominantly what we are seeing among adolescents. So the Juul has two components. The bottom part is the device, which includes the battery and the temperature regulation, and the top part is the liquid cartridge. That's what we call the pod. This device was launched 2 years ago. So although it has taken off right now, it has been around for quite a while. The company has changed some regulation with their website. They now have it directed that you have to be 21 to log into the website and to purchase these products, not 18. So they are trying to take precautions when it comes to adolescent youth, but unfortunately what we're seeing is a high usage rate of this product independently. There are over 50,000 posts. If you just go on your social media account and you hashtag Juul on Instagram or Twitter, you will find numerous postings when it comes to the Juul. The nicotine content is extremely high. It goes up to 60 milligrams of nicotine, which is the equivalent to a pack of cigarettes. So that gives you about 200 puffs out of that electronic device. And then the last part is the cost, which can vary drastically. We see the Juul ranging from $35 to $50 to $60. If you have social media, it is not uncommon for youth to trade out these products, to sell these products. And then the pods that you get on top, you get in a 4-pack. They're about $15 to replace, which is not very expensive. So this is some current data that we have. And the really important part that I want you to take away with this is that over 2 million high school and middle school students in 2016 admitted to using electronic cigarettes. That was 2016. So I want to give you some local statistics. So with Breathe, Pennsylvania, we run the Smokeless Saturday program. and we have about 17 different locations where we do programming. We are in the southwestern region of Pennsylvania. I can tell you that in 2016, we had 212 referrals into the program. So that was 212 kids that got caught with tobacco products on school property and were sent to our program for a 3-hour intensive education. So fast forward, we are now at 2017 to 18, and this will tell you how much this has changed. This year alone, with a few more months of school left, I've had over 560 referrals. Of those 560 referrals, 90% are for electronic cigarettes, predominantly the Juul. So that tells me that we know this is a big problem, and not talking about it doesn't fix the problem, which is why you're here trying to get this education. So I want to give you some terminology that I think is not only important for you to know, but important for you to sometimes hear. So when we hear these things with adolescents discussing it, maybe we don't know exactly what they're talking about, and I hope that this gives you a little more information about that. So vaping or vapor refers to the juice. That's the product that you're putting inside of the electronic cigarette. That is where you produce the aerosol. The juice has 4 components. So with traditional cigarettes, we have about 7,000 chemicals, about 60 carcinogens. With chew tobacco, we have about 3,000 chemicals, 28 carcinogens. And then we have electronic cigarettes. It sounds very deceiving when I say that there are only 4 ingredients in that product. But the thing is, these ingredients are much more toxic and much more powerful. So we have water, we have nicotine, we have our flavorings, and then we have a combination solution, which is propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin. So that combination solution can vary with each individual product. And when we get to the very end of this presentation, I want everybody to write down the website that I have listed, where you can go and you can look at what products are made, what flavorings they have, and where they rate on toxicity level. So we have mechanical mods. These are unregulated mods. These are mods that have absolutely no circuitry. The vape diminishes once the battery starts to die down. The mechanical mod, which is regulated, that would be that big box mod that I was showing you. You have temperature control, you have regulated or fixed voltage, variable wattage. So you can really regulate that product. Some of the e-cigarette terminology that I think is important to know, which is dripping. Dripping is when you take that juice and you put it directly onto the coil. The coil is where you wrap your cotton, that's your atomizer. The cloud chasing is vapors who are trying to achieve the largest cloud. So a lot of people that have social media can hashtag cloud chasing, and you will also see these images there. Throat hit is when you're ingesting high levels of nicotine to get a tingling feeling in the back of your throat. And then last but not least is vape hole. The reason why I'm really going to focus on vape hole is because this is what we are seeing in the school systems. So vape hole is someone who vapes deliberately in a public area very obnoxiously. We have seen this in schools, we have seen this in courthouses, we have seen this in movie theaters, or predominantly anywhere that you should not be using traditional tobacco products. Now, the very confusing thing about this is that e-cigarettes are not regulated under clean indoor air. So that is one of the things that we see with vape hole, is that perception of risk has gone down because people know that it's not included in that Clean Indoor Air Act. So the brief history of cigarettes. I think it's important to know electronic cigarettes are not new. Electronic cigarettes have been around. The first patent went out in 1963. And it was actually Herbert Gilbert. He is from Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania. He designed and put out the first patent. It was never commercialized. E-cigarettes traditionally were not a big hit. They were deemed the fake cigarette. Then we progressed to 2003. A pharmacist in China, his father was dying from lung cancer, so he decided to commercialize the electronic cigarette. That's when he learned how to extract the liquid nicotine. We move forward to 2007. They introduced them into the United States, and they were not popular. 2007, they were not a hit. 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, they still were not hitting the market like they expected. But when 2012 came around, something changed. A lot of that has to do with marketing. A lot of that has to do with very little federal regulation. So, 2012, the surge has happened. The biggest reason for that surge was the regulation. That means you did not have to be 18 to purchase this product. That means you could be 13. You could walk into a Sheetz or a Get-Go, and you could purchase any of these devices. I can tell you, with the Smokeless Saturday program, the youngest age that we've had referred into the program was a 10-year-old that could not read, could not write, but he was caught with an e-hookah. So there are a lot of different variables to this. The e-cigarette regulation has changed over the years. We had about 4 years where there was absolutely no regulation. You could purchase what you wanted. You didn't have to be any specific age. People were making their own products. People were selling their own products. I'm sure you see vape shops locally around. They are producing their own products, their own quality. So essentially, we have no idea what is wrapped up into that product. So 2016 came along. The FDA changed a few things. They extended the regulatory process that we have with traditional tobacco products. And now you have to be 18 to purchase these products. Now we have warnings on the side of these products that nicotine is addictive. Vape shops have to produce ingredients. They have to show quality control. There has been an extension put on that. So again, you still really have no clear idea of what is going into this product without that regulation. So the allure. This is the allure right here. So these tricks, these different things that you can do with the vapor, the different devices that you can make are all very attractive to the adolescent user. So I want you to raise your hand. Raise your hand if you have social media. Okay, so put your hand down. So raise your hand if you've ever taken a selfie. And don't lie. Okay. So can somebody tell me, why do we take selfies? Why do we do that? Because we take a selfie and then we post it to a social media account. Why might we do that? Because we want people to see what we look like, their perception of us, right? We don't post the bad selfies. We post the good ones. If we go on Snapchat and we add our funny faces and our bunny ears, we post those, right? It's the perception. It's the same thing with this. We show and we give out what we want people to believe. This looks enticing. This looks encouraging. But what they don't show you is that these took hundreds of shots. They don't show you liquid nicotine toxicity. They don't show you that this man was probably vomiting, having seizures, heart palpitations from high levels of ingestion of nicotine. They do not show you those things. They show you a quick glimpse, just like we can do when we post on our social media accounts. We take one image and we read much more into it. So these are some of the marketing strategies that I want you to be aware of. This is the social rewards, which really goes down to peer pressure and seeing someone else doing something which looks encouraging, where the perception of risk seems low, so then you try it. Here, this is where the marketing industry is targeting parents, talking about when you're switching from traditional cigarettes to electronic cigarettes, how much better you feel, how much longer you'll live. This one says, feel great about what you smoke. Now say that to yourself. Feel great about what you smoke. And then you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put a guy on the side of a mountain with his arms up in the air, and I'm going to slap a leaf on it. Because when I put a leaf on something, in our society, we think natural. We think organic. We think non-GMO. That is what we're thinking. But I ask you to look a little bit deeper into that and say, feel great about what you smoke. So you have propylene glycol and vegetable glycerin, 2 toxins that are found in this product. Is there anything natural or organic about that? Absolutely not, but it's a marketing tactic. Because big tobacco knows how to market these products. This is one that really targets adolescents. We have the fruit flavors on the left. So we have 7,700 flavors right now. That is a lot of flavors. And when I go into schools and I do education, I will ask, hey, can you give me some different flavors? And kids will raise their hands. They will tell me Swedish Fish, Peach Rings, Captain Crunch, vanilla, strawberry watermelon. All of these different flavors that since these kids were young, as parents, we have told them that these products are okay. So the marketing industry has really captured that part. Sports sponsorships, that's really encouraging youth that are using these products. I had one student in particular that came into a Smokeless Saturday program, and he told me that he was a wrestler. He was trying to cut weight for wrestling, so he was using a vape pen with pizza flavoring. So he would eat very little, and he would be able to use nicotine as a stimulant drug. That is one way that we can market these products. He learned a lot more about the health effects and what that actually does to his body when he took the class. So we ask ourselves why. We have all of this marketing. And anybody that owns a business, we know that we want that business to thrive. We know that we want that business to make money. So big tobacco for years and years have made thousands, millions, billions of dollars. And big tobacco now owns every single part of the electronic industry. So when you think about that, when you think 60 years back, when traditional cigarettes were being encouraged, and now we're in 2018 where we know the health effects and the health consequences of those traditional cigarettes, I want you to think about electronic cigarettes and realize that these youth, our children, are the guinea pigs of all of these products. That means although federal regulation has just started, we know that these toxins are there. We know that this can harm the body. So health concerns and considerations, we did touch through Kyle's presentation on the concept of harm reduction. Education is key. I mean, we really need prevention education programs. We need that knowledge base out there because not talking about this problem doesn't fix it. We do have renormalizing the act of smoking. So when I talk about data, in the Smokeless Saturday program, traditionally, when we would see traditional cigarettes, we would find that most youth that were using those products were coming from tobacco homes. And what we're finding with electronic cigarettes from our post-survey data is that the youth coming into this program that are using electronic cigarettes are coming predominantly from non-tobacco homes. So that is a very, very different thing for data purposes on our end. So we have these health concerns listed. I'm going to go through them one by one. So we have acute nicotine toxicity. Those are liquid nicotine, high levels of liquid nicotine. 1 tablespoon of pure liquid nicotine can kill an adult. 1 teaspoon can kill a child. Lipoid pneumonitis is lipoid pneumonia. It's a rare respiratory illness that may occur from aspiration or inhalation of fat-like material into the lungs. So I encourage you to do more research on things like vegetable glycerin and the fatty-like substance that that produces. Impaired cough, bronchiolitis obliterans. Most people have heard the term popcorn lung. Can you raise your hand if you've heard of popcorn lung before? So a lot of times that's used as a scare tactic. And people don't really understand what popcorn lung is. So I want to give you a really good description of what that is and a study that was produced and why that is so important when I'm talking to you about all of these flavorings like Swedish fish and peach rings. So bronchiolitis obliterans is a serious, irreversible condition where tiny air sacs in the lungs become scarred. This damage is permanent. It is chronic. You cannot recover from that. A study published in 2015 from the Journal of Environmental Health Perspectives showed that harmful chemicals associated with popcorn lung are present in many types of flavored electronic cigarettes, particularly those with flavors like fruit and candy that may appeal to young smokers. Of the 51 flavored electronic cigarettes tested, the flavoring chemicals were found in 47 and diacetyl specifically in 39 different samples. So when we start running the studies, we are seeing many more toxins in these juices, in these liquids. These are some of the poison control calls. This is not updated information. That information comes out about every 2 years. E-cigarette exposure, 1 month in 2010 to 215 in 1 month for 2014. 51% of exposures to children that are very young ages, which I'm sure you can gather. If any of these products are left out on a table, if anything spills, children are touching that product, pets are touching that product, eating that product, that all contributes to poison control calls. And then, of course, we have the potential for explosion. So sometimes when we hear explosion, we think that that's being used as a scare tactic. And what I can tell you is that is absolutely not a scare tactic. That is very much a reality. I sat in 6 months ago on a federal conference with the University of North Carolina. They had surgeons, they had doctors show very graphic pictures of electronic cigarette explosions. I am not going to show you very graphic photos, but I am going to show you one in particular. So this is a device that we saw in the very beginning that exploded on an individual. That is what the explosion did when he was vaping inside of his bathroom. So that is his bathroom sink. So as you can tell, that is a very powerful explosion. This is Andrew Hall. Andrew Hall has become a big advocate talking about change when it comes to electronic cigarettes. He lost 8 teeth, damage to his jaw, burns to his face, burns to his hands and his legs. But what I encourage you to really think about is, yes, this happened to him and he has recovered, but he also had 3 daughters in the home. It is very easy to activate these devices. So what happened here could have been prevented, but it could have also been a lot worse had a young child gotten a hold of those products. So some of the things that you really want to think about if you are around electronic cigarettes, if you have electronic cigarettes, if schools are confiscating electronic cigarettes, is how you store these products. You never want to pull out the batteries and put metal on metal. Metal on metal is a high risk of explosion. You never want to put these products in your car and leave them there all day. We have done that with traditional cigarettes. We can put it in our purse and maybe leave our purse in the car. That is not something you should be doing with electronic cigarettes. Do not charge your electronic cigarettes overnight. That lithium-ion battery is the same battery that we've seen in the Samsung Galaxy phones, the same battery that we've seen in hoverboards. Those are something that you do really want to avoid doing. If your battery or if your device gets wet, you need to be very careful. Do not ever charge your vape with a phone or a tablet charger. So again, These are on the Food and Drug Administration website. You can look at these. I really encourage you to check out that website. So then we have other uses of vaping, and this essentially comes down to any product that you can put into a liquid, you can vape. So I have listed a couple different here. We have butane hash oil, which also has names of butter, marijuana wax, earwax, hash, synthetic cannabinoids, which would be your K2 spice, bath salts, flocka, and then all of these products can cause severe hallucination, overdose, death. And then I really want to talk about vaping marijuana, because although we know that you can vape nicotine, on the post-survey data that we've seen through Smokeless Saturday, 60% of youth are admitting to using marijuana in those vape pens. So it's not something that we can avoid talking about. So here you have two types of products that can be vaporized. You can have your cannabis oils, which would be your marijuana oil, or you can have your plant, which would actually be that dry leaf flower. The cannabis oils are really predominant. There are so many diverse products. What I can tell you, the difference between the two is if somebody is smoking, combustion, smoking, the dry leaf flower, you're getting about a 30% potency with THC. The cannabis oils extract solely the THC, and you get anywhere from a 50 to a 90% potency. So the potency of that product drastically changes. And then you have the extraction process, how you really extract those products and why you should be concerned about that. So how much of the solvents remain in the cannabis extract and whether or not this poses a risk, whether cannabis extracts carry dangerous amounts of pesticides and other contaminants. And this is what I think is really important. We know that there is both recreational and medical legalization in California, so I think that this part is good to read. In California, where testing is not mandated, 57 samples of cannabis concentrates were brought to a laboratory. The laboratory analysis found that 72% of the samples presented solvent residuals, mostly isopentane, but also butane, hexane, propane, among others. A third, 33.3% of the concentrates were contaminated with pesticides. So vaping devices for marijuana, again, there is a variety of those as well, just as I had shown you a variety of traditional electronic cigarette products. You have a tabletop vaporizer, you have vape pens, and you have dab rigs. The only one that I did not put on my slides would be the dab rig. Vape pens are a newer method. This is what we're seeing predominantly among adolescents. These are some of the devices that you would see. The one on the left is the tabletop. The one in the middle looks very similar to the Juul. That holds the dry leaf flower. And this one on the right holds your cannabis oils. So the concerns would be the inhalation of any of these solvents, and then your increase of risk perception in using these products. The impact of smoking marijuana. Now I'm going to compare smoking and vaping, so you're going to get both amounts of information. Marijuana smoke is harmful. It clearly damages the human lung. It contains harmful chemicals that include airway irritants, tumor promoters, many carcinogens. Marijuana can cause visible and microscopic injury of the large airways, increasing likelihood of developing chronic bronchitis. The inhalation patterns of smoking marijuana are very different than smoking traditional cigarettes. So the pattern that we see is someone takes a deep breath and holds that, which can increase your chronic cough, phlegm production, wheeze, and acute bronchitis. So the impact of vaping marijuana. Vaporizers, like I have already said, release several harmful chemicals. We have certain chemicals like ammonia that can negatively interact with your central nervous system on top of the nicotine, on top of any other drug that you're putting into that product. Potential cancer-causing substances are released. Pre-existing conditions such as asthma can most definitely be aggravated. Cannabis oil is most often thinned into that propylene glycol or polyethylene glycol solution. And so this is the end of the presentation, and this is the website that I really encourage everyone to take a really good look at. This website really covers everything you need to know about electronic products, about juice, about the testing that they're seeing. No tobacco liquid should ever be considered safe. These products are not safe. We know that they are not safe. There are many toxins. I encourage you to all do your research. Vapor has irritants, toxins, nicotines, flavorings, and other agents inside all of those products. Now, this site that I'm giving you on the very end, when the Food and Drug Administration created some of this regulation, they created 14 different sites called the Center for Tobacco Regulatory Science and Health, Lung Health e-liquid database. So it's a database that will cover all of the quality and all of the quantity of all of those juice products. So I did bring some of these products in today, so I don't have them out here yet. If you would like to come up and see in person what they look like, I really welcome you, encourage you to come up and look at these products. I know that it can sometimes be very difficult to understand exactly what this is when you see it on a screen, and I encourage you to ask questions. Please don't hesitate to reach out. There is no stupid question, there is no silly question. These are very diverse products, so I encourage you to ask. So that is it on my part.
Okay, everybody, Mr. Longo has another microphone, and we'd like to give you the opportunity to be able to ask any questions you have from our two presenters. And then after they answer some of the questions, and for time purposes, we'll pass things on to Dr. Shearer, and it will give you guys a little bit of a message. So does anybody have any questions?
Hello? Come on, who's going to be the first one?
So it is by referral. We would never turn away a parent that wanted to put a student into that program. Most of the time, the program is designed for kids that are caught with tobacco products on school property. Instead of receiving that typical tobacco citation, which could range anywhere from $150 to $300, we take it down to $50 and give them the intense education. But again, if you want more education, if that's something that you're looking for, we certainly wouldn't turn anyone away.
Other questions? Yes, sir. Can you speak louder? I can come over.
So no, they do not smell like traditional cigarettes. Even the tobacco flavored ones do not smell like traditional cigarettes. What we find is that they typically smell as if somebody has just used Bath and Body hand sanitizer, more fruity smells. And the Juul product in particular has a very, very low scent, a very, very low vapor. So no, unfortunately, I mean, if you use any kind of body spray, you know, it's very easy to cover and conceal the smell of that product.
Let me get this to you, sir. No? Okay. That's okay.
Okay, so the Juul package, the top cartridge is preloaded. So if you have the pen style, you are refilling your own product. So the nicotine content could definitely vary. The Juul package, the top pod, like I said, is the equivalent of a pack of cigarettes. That can sustain 200 puffs. There really isn't, as far as guts, a difference to the products. They're both regulated products. They both work the same way. It's really your preference. So with the pen style, you have coils, you have cotton. In order to keep that product working, you keep that cotton moist with juice. And you do not have any of that when you have the Juul. The top part of that cartridge is your juice, that is your product. You don't have to worry about replacing coils. And I can tell you, if somebody is not savvy with using electronic cigarettes and they are using the cotton and the coils, it's very easy to produce combustion. It's very easy to burn through that juice, dry out your cotton, and the cotton actually catch on fire. So in return, you have combustion, you have carcinogens, carbon monoxide.
Since you mentioned about the 200 puffs with a Juul, is the first puff on a Juul more potent than the 200th puff, or is that regulated to the point that you know it's constant throughout?
So the Juul is not, it's regulated by how you use that product. There is no stopper from one puff to another. So if you wanted to take deep, long breaths, you could do that with that product. So it really depends on use. The 200 puffs is just designating that that's the average use. But what we see is that somebody could use that product continuously and ingest that much nicotine very quickly.
We have a young man over here with a question.
I don't know if this is really related, but I was thinking the Smokeless Saturday, couldn't it be potentially dangerous to have so many kids that were vaping in one place?
Well, I can tell you with Smokeless Saturday, it's not just vaping. So sometimes we have kids that come in for chew tobacco. Sometimes we have kids come in for traditional cigarettes. So it's a variety. And really what we find is that when you pull these classes together, kids feel comfortable in talking about that. Some kids really do not have the knowledge base to understand these products. So after we give them a lot of education, most of the surveys come back and they want to create change. And in Smokeless Saturday, every single student has to make a plan to quit. So they all really, we encourage goals and a good quit plan.
Yes.
I was just curious, in what sense is the FDA regulating these products? You said that they're empowered to regulate these products. What are they doing and what are they planning to do?
So the plan is to really change the imports. The plan is to start taxing these products. Right now, so you have to be 18 to purchase traditional cigarettes and chew tobacco. Up until 2016, there was no requirement for electronic cigarettes, which is ironic because if you're trying to quit smoking, if you want to use the patch or the gum or the lozenge, you have to be 18. But you did not have to do that prior. So as far as that goes, they're putting warning labels on the juice. People that are producing these products, such as manufacturers, have to submit that ingredient list to that lab that I listed so it can be tested. You would be very surprised in the products that pop up from juice that hasn't been tested. So for example, I can tell you, Westmoreland County, there is a vape shop in the middle of the Westmoreland Mall. You can vape in that shop. There is no door, there is no shut-off. You can purchase the products, and there is no regulation. There is no quality control. So you don't have an ingredient list when you walk in that store as to which product you're buying and exactly what's in it. So the federal government really wants to step in and make that change. So if you purchase a pack of Marlboro Lights, you could go on to the Food and Drug Administration site and you could see every ingredient that is in that traditional cigarette. That is what they plan to do with electronic cigarettes. I just think it's going to be much harder to regulate that because we have so many different devices.
With that said, we ran into a situation a couple months ago and everything was bought offline. Who knows where it came from? I don't know what country in the world that it came from. The ingredients were not in a language that I could understand. So the FDA can regulate it all that it wants to, but I don't think that's going to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
We probably have time for one or two more questions. I also want to say that we will encourage you to ask questions if you want privately afterwards. as well as indicate any questions you may have on the evaluation. At the end, we'd be happy to try to get some answers to you and post that on our website. Any other questions? Oh,
I noticed that you're filming this. Is that right? Is that available for people who weren't able to attend, like other parents, or
Yes, we will-
any of these presentations that were made?
Absolutely. It's NATV is here. They are filming it. It's being streamed live, and then we will put it on the website to be able to share with each of our parents. Absolutely.
little shout out to Nash Uproar. They're working this tonight, and we will grab that from them, and it will be available. Maybe one more question, and then we.
I haven't heard any conversations about what the school system's doing about this. I have a daughter in high school. It's going on in the classroom. It's going on in the bathrooms. Your number actually seems low to me based on Instagram and all of that. I'm seeing patterns that teachers are actually aware of versus not aware of, and what the school board is starting to do.
Maybe this is a good segue to our superintendent of schools. I'm not sure.
And as Dr. Shear is saying up here is, we are seeing it more and more in the schools. As Rebecca said, we're seeing it more and more. The amount of devices that come out, and I look at her, it's daily that they're changing. They are getting smaller. They're able to conceal them. We have seen them in the school district, and we have seen them in each of the schools here at the high school levels. We know that the students are becoming, they're readily available. And we know they're readily available. And it's also, as a school district, we're trying to get as much information out to the parents, get as much information out to the students, and we're also doing things for our teachers. Because as the times are changing and the new, as a Juul, a year and a half ago, not many of us knew exactly what a Juul was. Now it's something that's readily available, and that's the most common one being seen. So we'll have information, we're having in-services to our teachers, getting them the information, sharing presentations from Rebecca, sharing slides, sharing those things so that we can get that information to them so they can be aware of what they're looking for. If you didn't know a year ago what a Juul was, teachers are becoming more aware of the term and knowing how the students conceal them, how they will plug them into their keyboards, into their laptops and using it as a charging device. And it's also something that as a school district we have is in our drug paraphernalia. So there is suspensions when you are caught with them. We go through the process, and the process changed a year and a half ago, Dr. Shear? Year and a half ago, to talk about, because of the changes in all the information, like people from Rebecca, Kyle, that are giving us that information, we're changing the policy, or have changed the policy within our school district to be a strict policy, and so that the students know that it's something that there's a punishment there, and there's also a supportive end of it from student assistance, and also referring to gateway rehab, pyramid rehab, to be able to get some help and get some services for it. So I think also, time-wise, I'd like to pass things off to Dr. Shear, and thank Dr. Shear for being here, and also Dr. Andraco and Mr. Christopher, our two assistant superintendents that are here. And I also want to take 2 seconds to give a special thank you to Ms. Maximo. Ms. Maximo is sitting over here. Ms. Maximo is our Director of Special Education and Pupil Services. She is mine and Jeff's leader to be able to run all these Community Connections events for the past 10 years. And we want to thank her because recently she just announced her retirement, so it's going to be her last Community Connections. I think it'd be nice if you guys all give her a nice round of applause for all that she does for the school district. As Jeff said, we'll have the evaluation up there after Dr. Shear is done. If you could fill that out and give it all the information you can for that, and we'll also be emailing it to you. Right now, I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Shear.
Thank you, Doug. And I wanted you to hear from him because Doug and Jeff are the two individuals that actually sit in both of our high schools and are dealing with a lot of these challenges. And so we meet on an ongoing basis. We have something called Community and Police Partnership, where we're constantly sharing the changes and the trends that are occurring that we're seeing not only in our schools but also in the community, and that often is what drives these events. And so as these things come forward, we then want to take this as an opportunity to educate our families. And so Community Connections is built around that. So last year we did some activities around the opioid epidemic. We will continue to do these things because as they evolve, we as the adults sometimes, it's difficult for us to keep up. But also now we're trying to use technology to leverage that a bit. We know it's difficult for people to come to all of these events, and so we do try to live stream as many as we can and then archive them so people can watch them on our website at a later time. And one of the things that I often point out to folks that they may not be aware of, I mean, we're very unique at North Allegheny in that we have these two individuals. Most school districts don't have dedicated student assistance coordinators for their high schools, and that is unique, and that's unique because we feel it's important. We feel it's important to stay ahead of this as much as we can, and I think a few months back I was at Nash, and I was actually meeting with Dr. Kreider, and he was coming a few minutes late to our meeting, and he had in his hand one of the jewels, and I looked at him and I said, did we find someone today? And he said, well, no, actually, this is what I've been doing, going into all the department meetings, educating our teachers on this is what you need to look for. So to answer the question that was asked before, we are trying to educate our teachers. We're trying to educate our students and certainly our parents. And also one of the other reasons why we've added this week the Beyond the Stripes. So we have that quarterly newsletter the parents are getting to try to help you with some of those things. Being a parent's difficult. I have two students in the district myself, and so as they get older and you start to navigate some of these challenges when they get to a certain age, there isn't a playbook for all of this. You know, a lot of us are learning together, and so I really do want to thank the two individuals that coordinate this for us here in the district. I do want to thank Ms. Maximo, and certainly want to thank Kyle and Rebecca tonight for being here, because we rely on these experts. We rely on the people who deal with this day in and day out to help educate us and inform us so that we can turn around and then share it with you. The last thing I would say is if you did not pick up one of the handouts when you came in tonight, please make sure you do that. There are some resources available, but it's also an opportunity for you to give us some feedback as we continue to offer these sessions. So I know our two presenters here said they will make themselves available, so at this time I will turn it over to them. Thank you very much for coming out, and you have a wonderful evening.
Please feel free to come up if you have any questions for our speakers and if you want to see any of the devices. Thank you.